let's talk about the branded side deck. So I'm just going to go through a range of cards I've got here. I'm going to take you through my most recent branded side deck. So this is the most recent branded side deck that I did for one of my profiles, and I'll explain each of the cards as I go. I will then also kind of take you through some other cards that are used in pretty much everything, and then we'll go through the side deck binder. So let's start off with dealing with back rows. So we'll start off with Jinzo and Denko. Now the reason we've got this ratio is purely because, so Jinzo can be summoned off of Expulsion. I'll talk about that a little bit in a second because a lot of people are confused at the best way to use this. Denko Sekka is one of the ones that branded has the benefit that if you open up well enough, you can play without your normal summon. So rather than having to, like, Jinzo is like a go first card against trap decks, whereas Denko is a go second card. And the ability of just being able to go, okay, cool, normal summon Denko and lock out the board, or at least the back row, is really, really important. Now, obviously, Denko does suffer against other types of decks as well because, you know, it can get bounced, it can get monster removal, everything else, and it's not as strong as Jinzo. And this is what I was trying to explain yesterday in my video. The thing with Denko is you kind of go like draw phase, standby phase, and then main phase, you get the first action. So that's when you normal summon Denko. Unless they have something that negates the summon, like a Solemn Judgment or a Solemn Warning, Denko goes through. They cannot respond with anything like a Torrential Tribute, a Compulse, a Book of Eclipse, not Foolish Barrel, Floodgate Trap Hole. They can't do any of that to get rid of it and Book a Moon it and stop it going through. So that's why Denko is such a good little card. Now the reason that Jinzo works out so well in the branded deck is because you can summon it off of Expulsion. Now a lot of people said to me, well, why don't you just summon it to your field? And it's a very good point. Summoning this to your field is very, very good. However, by summoning this to your opponent's field, when you look at the trap decks that are in the format right now, you look at stuff like Labyrinths and of course Trap Tricks being the main ones. Neither of those decks have a single tribute summon. Like everything else, so for the Labyrinths they need 2 monsters. For Trap Tricks they don't actually, unless they're going to tribute summon into a Parallel Disease, have a way to get rid of Jinzo. On top of that as well, by giving your opponent Jinzo, they can't activate Lightning Storm if they choose to side that, if they choose to main that. They can't, obviously Jinzo would negate an evenly matched regardless of how you kind of, whoever's fielded it on. But on top of that as well, because you summon it in defense, they can't switch it to attack that turn and kill it. The only downside that you do have with Jinzo being on your opponent's side of the field is that you need to get rid of it in order to win the game, and as soon as you get rid of it, their whole backline is online. So that's kind of where you want to be able to go, okay, cool, I've locked you on a Jinzo, I know the next turn you're going to have to waste the battle phase to put him into attack and then kill me, or you're going to put 2 monsters on the board so you can tribute him off the next turn. So it's one of the ones where you want to follow it up with a way of dealing with your opponent's back row, or you'll pick your opponent's board's back row away during the end phase. So the reason of giving it to your opponent as well is it also plays around a Kaiju, it also plays around Lava Golem. They can't get rid of it as easily. Like, they could still Lava Golem your board, but they still then won't be able to activate traps for at least their turn and of course the turn after that. So that's why I think Jinzo is actually a really, really good card for the branded deck as well. So that's pretty straightforward and simple on those ones. Moving on to the next card that was in my side deck. Now, obviously this one kind of comboed off with Thrust. Alongside Thrust, we also played Dark Hole, Harpy's Feather Duster, and Eradicator. So Thrust is what Thrust is. Like, if you've got the money, if you've got access to it, it's a very expensive card. However, it will mean that you can cut down your ratios on some of these individual cards that you see before you. Obviously, Feather Duster is, you know, irrelevant because it can only be played at 1. But you can start to consider other cards in this lineup, stuff like D-Barrier, and of course stuff like a Pointer if you want to be incredibly spicy, and you also have Lightning Storm. So that's where Thrust will come into the play. If you don't have access to Thrust, then you obviously have the ability to kind of increase all of these up to the maximum capacities. You can play 3 Evenlies, 3 D-Barriers, you can only play a Pointer, 1 Duster, but then you can play 3 Dark Holes and as many Eradicators if you want to. So ultimately, the way that I've gone with this one is D-Barrier is very good in the Mirror matchup, it's very good against the Kashtira matchup, but it's pretty much ultimately dead against all the other matchups. The reason for a Pointer was one of the ones that offer Thrust. You could then activate this, look at their hand, get hand knowledge, as well as take away anything they've got in their hand that could possibly break your board. Evenly Matched, in my opinion, is one of the best kind of side deck cards. If not, you're going to try and main this for going second cards, and that's why another side card I play is also Lancia, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. So Evenly Match is incredibly powerful. Not only is it a board breaker, but the fact that it banishes everything face down, it dodges past stuff that can't be targeted and can't be destroyed. It is also your opponent that has to banish them face down. So if they own a token, they can't choose to keep something else and banish the token. They are locked into having the token, because tokens cannot be banished face down. If they have multiple cards or even one card that is unaffected by trap effects, it doesn't mean that that card gets to stay along with something else, because it is the player that is banishing the card, so they even need to get rid of that if they have a token on their board. Duster is pretty straightforward and simple on this one. It's just to deal with the back row. And then, of course, Darkhold. The reason I put this in here is a branded matchup or a branded deck would auto lose if you get given an Ibly. If you get given an Ibly, you can't, of course, if you play the Link Karibo, you could do, but you turn it into Link Karibo, your entire branded fusion play is offline the entire turn. So the only way you can get rid of the Ibly is to tribute summon it off, which is something you don't want to be doing, because it means you need to have hard opened up your buy steal or a card that requires a single tribute. And that's where I felt Darkhold was really, really good, because not only could Darkhold be used in a Kashtira matchup for that exact example to get rid of Ibly, but it can then also be used to get rid of a Rise Heart, and of course it can get rid of the Fenrir. The only thing it won't get rid of, because they'll be able to protect it with its materials, is of course the Shangri-La, so you do need to be a little bit careful on what you're going to be facing against it. And the last one was Eradicator. Like, this to me was just an auto win. I was like, well, at the end of the day, we're trimming off our cards already to be using stuff like Nightmare to get the Nightmare Gimmick Puppet to our opponent's board. If you then do that and combo off an Eradicator, there's no way they play. They lose all of their cards. They lose any cards that they could probably set. Again, if you're going up against a trap deck, they can't deal with it. They're completely locked out. And it's just a very nice one that if you open up, for example, an Eradicator or a route to it, plus you give your opponent, like, or you have the ability to give your opponent Jinzo, you can Eradicator, call them out for 3 turns, and then bring Jinzo to your side of the board. Then, of course, for the rest of the cards that was in the branded side deck specifically was, of course, Lancia with Lava Golem and Neospatian. Now, Lava Golem can very easily be any kaiju that you prefer. The reason I quite like Lava Golem over this is it is very dependent on the format. I feel that there are a lot of decks that will produce 2 monsters you want to deal with. So, for example, Mirror Jade and Dragoon, or Rise Heart and Shangri-La. Now, obviously, if people are very cautious of Lava Golems and they start going back to the way that, or the current way that people are playing it, and they're just putting one monster on the board, like a Rise Heart, then you're like, oh, I really wish I had a Kaiju rather than Lava Golem. Plus, Lava Golem doesn't take up your normal summon, it just doesn't allow you to normal summon that turn. So, it's very important. Lava Golem can still be bounced back and used again the same turn if you have the capabilities to do that. But in the example what I said with Denko, where you could technically play this deck without needing to use your normal summon, Lava Golem was just one of them options. And it's another one of them really cool options where if you're getting close to time, you Lava Golem your opponent and then pass, and then during the standby phase is a trigger to burn them. And then if they can't get rid of it or gain that life point back or do that additional damage, that can ultimately end up winning you the game as well. Lancia was in here because I think it's a really good card against the Kashtira matchup. Being able to drop this against them can be very, very damaging because it will stop their Shangri-La. It means they can't cheat out a Rise Heart. They can only hard summon it. It also means they don't get to look at your extra deck with either the Mind Hacker, or if you do activate a monster effect, they can't look at your extra deck or even banish something with Fenrir or Unicorn. On top of that as well, this is a very good side card to counter the side. And what I mean by that is if your opponent puts in evenly matched, it's one of the weaknesses of branded that I have found. So one of the weaknesses of branded, obviously you got Nibiru can be quite painful, so can Ash Blossom, and then a well-timed evenly matched. So if you're then able to go, okay, and they go draw phase, standby phase, main phase, battle phase, activate evenly matched, not only can you make them waste a card, but you then have the ability to go even Lancia in response, and then they can't banish anything. Now, the one downside of playing this in the branded matchup is it does mean that Mirror Jade's effect would then be offline. I believe it can still send as cost, but just can't banish. I could be wrong on that. But the idea is that that's the biggest weakness that you would have. I believe you can also still activate branded in red because you just can't banish. You activate branded in red, you add them back to the hand, and then they go to the graveyard. But I haven't actually tried to do that under Lancia yet. I'm just using this as a, like, the 9 times out of 10, the idea is that you drop this against your opponent so they can't cash your board. And then you're very rarely saving it. Because keep in mind as well, you can't drop it during your turn. It can only be dropped during your opponent's turn. So it's more so to protect you from being even lead and then just kind of stopping them playing as well. And the last one you see here is the Neospatian Air Hummingbird, and the reason that I play this, as I mentioned in the profile, is that I was playing the Storm Neos, and the reason I played this is I main deck the Aquadolphin to deal with Ash Blossom, so this lists Hummingbird and Aquadolphin, so I had one extra deck space which was being used already, and it gave me ability to kind of win in time should it occur. Now, obviously, you do have other options if you want to be playing stuff like Super Poly, if you want to be playing stuff like Kaiji's, as I've already mentioned, Raw Sphere mode. You do have a lot of different options to kind of look at and adapt depending on your playstyle and where you kind of want to take the deck. But yeah, so I thought this would be helpful for you just to kind of show you a couple of different side deck options. And then, like I said, I'll edit the video, put it up for you guys as well so you can see it on a separate source. And then if you do have any questions, as absolutely always, put them in the comments down below. And of course, I will be more than happy to answer them for you. I probably can do a more in-depth video and go through more side deck cards and side deck text and everything else. But I feel that for this format, side decks are pretty straightforward. Like if you're not already playing certain cards in your main deck, like if you're not already playing, hopefully you guys are still getting sound. Let me just double check. Yeah, you guys should be getting sound. Sit talking to myself in silence. The sound of silence. Well, my own voice. Yeah, that's fun. And then, of course, if you're not already maining the Expulsion and Nightmare Puppet play, then obviously you can do that. And if you're not maining Book of Eclipses, you can main that. If you're not maining the Beerus, other hand traps, then obviously you can put those in as well. Anyway, yeah, thank you so much for you guys that joined me live. Like I said, I'll try and cut this up and put it onto its own separate video. But I've had to make this a short, sweet, simple video for today so that I can kind of get myself ready for a very early morning of work. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, guys, as absolutely always, stay safe and, of course, happy dueling.